Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube channel. Today I'm looking at some Dynasty sells. Make sure to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe if you haven't. Let's go. Our first sell, Zamir White, who's gotten a lot of discussion lately, but his career really doesn't warrant his current price. So let's take a look at why. In 2022, as a rookie, he did nothing. He had 17 carries for 17 yards. And yes, Josh Jacobs had a great season, but you would think that someone who was going to be good would have had more than 17 carries for 70 yards. He really didn't get on the field. And then last year, again, he really was getting cut in dynasty leagues after about 8 games. And then down the stretch, he was good. He had 104 carries for 451 yards, a touchdown, 4.3 yards a carry, and 15 catches for 98 yards. But he was okay. He only scored 1 touchdown, nothing special in rushing efficiency, nothing special in the receiving game. He really didn't deliver all that much. So this brings us into why. Why would Zamir White be a dynasty sell? We really have a tiny sample size of success and minimal passing game work. Essentially, White had a 4-game sample size of doing anything at all. And in those 4 games, he averaged 21 carries, 99.3 yards, and 2.3 catches for 15 yards with just 1 total touchdown. Even then, I mean, that's pretty good. It's a lot of volume, but he wasn't a fantasy star. The Raiders also had no other running backs. And look, I'm not saying that either Dylan Lobb or Alexander Madison is amazing or anything special, but they're better than the other backups the Raiders had last year. So I do think Zamir White is not getting 21 carries a game this year. And also, these types of, low draft capital running backs don't work long term. They almost never do. But on Keep Trade Cut, Zamir White's gotten a little out of control. It's up to running back. He's up to running back 20. I have him running back 25. I still feel like that's too high. The only reason I have him at running back 25 is there's, I guess, a world in which I'm wrong and Zamir White is good. But even then, he's not that young. He's already going to turn 25. So, yeah, I not really in on Zamir White, especially not at running back 20. Now, it's great to say that someone's a sell, but what you should be asking is, what are they a sell for? You have to give specific examples. So here are some examples that I've seen or heard about recently. The DLF Trade Finder, I believe, had this one. Sell Zamir White for the 204 in this year's draft. I would take that. In a super flex, that's going to be a player like, Trey Benson or Ricky Pearsall or Michael Penix, all of whom I would rather have over Zamir White. Another one here. You could add some picks to Zamir White to get Tank Dell. I love that. I love the asset of Tank Dell much more than I like Zamir White. And these other picks are not worth nearly as much as Tank Dell. And then I did hear about this one. Sell Zamir White for a 26 first. I find that hard to believe. I know people on my Patreon would never do that, but maybe someone in your league will do that. I have heard about it happening. So it's always worth a try to see. Now, our second sell today, it's kind of in the same vein, Zack Moss. So Zack Moss has had an interesting but not overly successful NFL career over his 4 years. Let's take a look at that. So as a rookie on Buffalo, 112 carries, 481 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4.3 yards a carry, 14 catches for 95 yards and a touchdown, 7.8 PPR points per game. And then in 2021, didn't really do much. 96 carries, 345 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3.6 yards a carry, 23 catches, 197 yards and a touchdown, 8.1 PPR points per game. So really the issue is that he was never able to overtake Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary remained the better player on Buffalo for all of these years. And then in 2022, he mixed the season between Buffalo and Indianapolis. He was traded. 93 carries, 456 yards and a touchdown, 4.9 yards a carry, so it was pretty efficient. 11 catches, 39 yards, and 5 PPR points per game. But through his first 3 years, he never got any volume, never was fantasy relevant for more than a game or two. There was nothing there. But then last year, he was good for Indianapolis. He had 183 carries, 794 yards, 5 touchdowns, 4.3 yards a carry, 27 catches, 192 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 12.1 PPR points per game. So he was a fantasy relevant player. However, why is Zack Moss a dynasty sell? He's never, not even once, had a fully productive fantasy season. 0 times. Last year was the closest, and it was very hit or miss. He's had minimal receiving work. I know he's on the Bengals. Zack Moss is not going to catch a bunch of passes on the Bengals. It's either going to be Chase Brown or not a running back at all. But it's not going to be Zack Moss. His 2023 performance is overrated, which we will get into a little bit. And he turns 27 during the 24 NFL season. So he never did anything for the first 3 years of his career. He washed out of Buffalo and wasn't relevant in Indianapolis really after the trade in 2022. He only got work and has only really ever gotten work in the times that Jonathan Taylor wasn't healthy. And then down the back half of the season, Taylor missed 2 games and Moss played those entire games. He was horrible in those 2 games. He managed 79 yards on 32 carries. That's less than 3 yards a carry. And he had 6 catches for 34 yards. He didn't do much there either. I feel like Zack Moss is one of those players where we're hoping that the 4 good games, he had 4 good games to start 2023, is the reality. Whereas the reality is probably the other 50 games where he wasn't very good, never was relevant, never did anything. So for me, I have Zack Moss at running back 37. I'm just totally out. This is the type of player I have no interest in because unlike Zamir White, who, I have ranked higher, but so does Keep Track Up. So that's why he's a sell. I have no interest in Zack Moss at all. I don't get it. This type of player has almost no upside. There is a Raheem Mostert that comes around who doesn't do anything for years and years and years and then becomes very good every once in a while, but that is very rare. And that doesn't happen almost ever. Almost all the time, it's players who are successful at the beginning of their career, at least at some point in the first 2 years. So the Zack Moss profile is really not one that I'm chasing. Now, how do we get rid of Zack Moss? Great question. You could sell him for a 25 second. That was a quick and easy way to get rid of Zack Moss. You might be able to pivot to a wide receiver, a young wide receiver, for someone who needs running back. Could you get Roman Wilson or Jermaine Burton back? And then this last one I saw on the DLF Trade Finder, could sell Zack Moss and Terry McLaurin for DK Metcalf. I'd much rather go to the safe asset of Metcalf, get rid of McLaurin, who's already 29, and Zack Moss as well, who's also older, for a younger, productive receiver in DK Metcalf. Now, if you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. You get my rankings, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month. And I also am doing Patreon video roster reviews on there, available only for patrons. So I really appreciate everyone who's signed up and any new patrons who join as we get to the NFL season. This will be where we discuss redraft, start sit, and all of that. This channel would do Dynasty, but if you want my redraft and start sit content, it's for patrons only. So I really appreciate everyone who signs up. With that said, let's get into our third Dynasty sell. Another running back that we're selling, DeAndre Swift. And again, I am not optimistic about DeAndre Swift. I have a few reasons. But let's look at his past career. So in 2020, 114 carries, 521 yards, 8 touchdowns, 4.6 yards a carry, and 46 catches for 357 yards and 2 touchdowns, 14.6 PPR points per game. He was pretty good. Then in 2021, even better, 151 carries, 617 yards, 5 touchdowns, 4.1 yards a carry, but 62 catches, 452 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 16.1 PPR points a game carried him on the receiving work. Then in 2022, kind of fell off a little bit. Was very efficient. 22 carries for 542 yards and 5 touchdowns, 5.5 yards a carry, but 48 catches, 389 yards, and 3 touchdowns, 13.7 PPR points a game. He was productive for his first 3 years. And then, oddly, last year, he had a lot of volume. 229 carries, 1,049 yards, 5 touchdowns, 4.6 yards a carry, and 39 catches for 214 yards and a touchdown, 12.5 PPR points per game. But despite all the volume, he did play all the games, which helped his total numbers. But in PPR points per game, it really went down, and that's because the receiving work went down. Now, why is DeAndre Swift a dynasty sell? Decline in receiving work, high target competition, already on his third NFL team, and an inability to maintain goal line work. I think Swift is a good NFL player, but he is not going to be the focus of this Bears offense. They have 3 high-end wide receivers and Cole Kmet. Swift is not going to, I think we'd be happy if he duplicated his 39 catches from last year. And it could be even less than that. I also think that Roschon Johnson or Khalil Herbert, I'm not sure which one it is, I think it's Roschon Johnson, will take a significant number of touches, as Swift has only managed a high touch volume in one season. And then he, really wasn't all that great on those touches. He reminds me a little bit of Miles Sanders in some ways, in that he was efficient on more limited volume over his first 3 seasons, missed some time. Then in year 4, stayed healthy and had more volume, and then signed a big free agent contract. And it didn't work out with Miles Sanders. And I kind of don't think it's going to work out with DeAndre Swift either, because I don't think the volume or the receiving or the goal line work is going to be there. I don't think any of those things are going to be there. I think he'll be okay, but I don't think he's going to be as bad as Miles Sanders was, but I think he's going to be just okay. And I don't want just okay at running back 19, where that costs in Dynasty. I have him at running back 21. But even that, I don't want him. I want other players in that range. I'm not taking my running back 21 in a dynasty draft. I'm not taking him at his redraft cost either. So how do I get rid of DeAndre Swift? So DeAndre Swift, some people still really like him. I'm obviously not one of those people. I have seen, this would be very optimistic, sell DeAndre Swift for 25 first. I'd love to do that, but that's probably optimistic. Now, this one I did see. Sell DeAndre Swift plus DK Metcalf for Jahmyr Gibbs. I kind of like tearing up. It's weird for me to trade for a higher-end running back, but combining Swift and Metcalf to get up to Gibbs seems like you're gaining some value there, so I would do that. And then this type of pivot to a rookie in this year's class. Could you get Blake Corum or Marshawn Lloyd plus something for DeAndre Swift? I suggested DeAndre Swift plus 25 third for Blake Corum or Marshawn Lloyd plus a second, but if you could do something else in that kind of vein, I think that's a good idea to get rid of DeAndre Swift. Now, as always, I answer the Patreon questions at the end of the video, so let's jump into those two of them. If Nico Collins establishes himself as the clear wide receiver 1 for the Texans this year, how high could he climb in your wide receiver rankings? Well, right now I have Nico Collins at wide receiver 16. I guess it's possible he could rise higher, but I don't think Tank Dell's going away, and I don't think that Collins is like a super elite wide receiver. He's already 25, which isn't old, but expecting him to be in the top 10 when he hasn't been there yet is hard. So, yes, I think Nico Collins could be a little bit higher if he has a really, really strong season. I really think it's going to be hard for Nico Collins to get in the Dynasty top 10. And, with those types of players in Dynasty, with that range, your Jalen Waddle, your Nico Collins, Devonta Smith, Michael Pittman, you're drafting them for the longevity of production that they provide, not necessarily hoping that they're really going to rise a lot in value. Lastly, who are your favorite sleeper rookie running backs this year? So let's say that Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, Blake Corum, and Marshawn Lloyd do not count as sleepers. They were drafted on day 2. They're not sleepers. As for sleepers, this year, Jalen Wright could be valuable, but that requires an injury. But the Dolphins scheme is one where I think if any running back is getting work who's not horrible, they'll have some value. Beyond that, Ray Davis and Bucky Irving have some chance to take work from James Cook and Rachaad White. I think Davis is more likely to get on the field in a complementary role. I think Cook is a much better player than White. But I think Irving, because White's not as good as Cook, I think Irving has a better chance to become the starter eventually. I will say, though, if those players don't become the RB2 on their horrid depth charts after a few weeks, I'll be very out, because day 3 picks usually only get one chance. And then lastly, of course, Kimani Vidal, just because the depth chart of Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins in front of him is so weak, he might have a chance to get his way onto the field. Now, if you like the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty, redraft, start sit, and more. Every sign-up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.